Hey Jude, the Beatles are coming to streaming. They made the announcement with that video you just saw featuring a medley of the band's biggest hits. Here to talk more about the Beatles streaming is contributing editor for Rolling Stone, Joe Levy. Joe, the Beatles start streaming midnight local time, so if you're waiting for the release, you can actually go to their website. They have a globe with a band of sun showing the sunshine.
I can hardly wait because I don't know any of these songs.
None of them.
I'm looking forward to learning the melodies and the words.
You've never heard any of them before.
I'm very unfamiliar with the work of these four gentlemen.
Yeah, somehow I find that one hard to believe. You know so much about the Beatles. Tell us, what was the holdup? The Beatles have been notorious for being ahead of their time, yet they are so late coming to streaming. What's been the holdup?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say they were ahead of their time up until 1969 when they broke up. But one other thing the Beatles were notorious for in their time was not being great at business, and they have been great at it ever since. Apple Corps, which administers the rights to all of the Beatles material, is very, very careful. It's likely they were waiting for the best deals they could make in streaming, but also they had no reason to rush. Not until streaming was a mature business, and this is one of the several signs that streaming is well past the tipping point now.
And no reason to rush because their sales, album sales, have been doing phenomenally.
Here's an amazing stat. The Beatles' #1 collection, 27 of their #1 hits, all of them in fact, came out in the year 2000. It's one of the best-selling records since 1991 when Nielsen started counting the sales of every album downloaded or CD. Over 30 million copies worldwide. It was selling about 1,000 copies a week. That's pretty good for a band that hasn't made new music since 1969.
So let's talk about streaming now that the Beatles are coming to streaming. What is the business model?
Well, the business model of streaming is royalty-based. You know, in a company like, say, Spotify, and in the fairness of full disclosure, I do a podcast for Spotify, but Spotify has a free tier, which is ad-supported, and then it has a subscription tier. Apple Music is all subscription, but ultimately any money generated is going towards streaming. Spotify pays 70% of its revenues out to rights holders. That means artists, labels, publishing companies, and it's been over $3 billion so far.
And has surpassed downloads at this point, is that right?
Well, downloads are declining. The total value generated in the music industry of downloads versus the total value generated by streaming isn't equal yet. It hasn't surpassed it yet, but the decline in downloads is being more than made up for the rise in streaming revenues that are going to labels. Artists aren't always seeing that money, and they're not always seeing that money very quickly, and that's a problem that's existed for some time. How does the music industry compensate artists?
Which brings us to Taylor Swift, Adele. Taylor Swift has been very vocal about her opposition to streaming. Do the Beatles making this move and, you know, the calculating of the financial benefits at this point, does this mean we're going to see Taylor Swift make this move as well?
Well, you know, I don't think it's going to affect what Taylor Swift and Adele have done. Now, Taylor Swift, just to be clear, isn't opposed to streaming per se. She's opposed to any sense that music is free. And so she wants to be on streaming services that only charge for subscription. So she is on Apple Music, not on Spotify. But Adele and Taylor Swift are rare exceptions. They're two of the biggest artists in the world, and they have full control over their music because they have deals with indie labels that upstream to major labels. There aren't a lot of artists in either of those positions who have this kind of power and can do what they want. There aren't a lot of artists who can afford to step away from streaming either and still have their music reach a younger generation. And that is one of the reasons why we see the Beatles moving towards streaming. The #1 collection that I mentioned earlier, that was a great gift for parents who wanted to give their kids the Beatles music in the streaming era. Now imagine those same parents or grandparents wanting to give young kids access to Beatles music. They can't give them a disc because the kids will just use it as a Frisbee. They don't know what it is, and they don't want to own download files. They want streaming. That's what kids want.
In your opinion, as you know, the music industry evolves, will artists like Taylor Swift eventually come to streaming?
It's entirely possible that as this continues to evolve, as the business continues to mature, as it reaches mass levels, which is what everyone says it will take to properly compensate artists, that more and more artists who are holding material back, like, say, the Beatles, like Taylor Swift, like Adele, will get on board. when the money is right, and I'm not trying to say this is only about money for Taylor Swift and Adele, but when the money is right, they'll be there.
And we've touched on this, but the Beatles' music is going to make tons of money while it goes streaming now. Who's going to get the bulk of that money?
The bulk of that money, I hope, is going to go to the Beatles, but really what it goes to is it goes through the streaming companies to the label and to the publishing company. The publishing company is Sony ATV. The label is Capitol, or Universal Music Group. Universal Music Group really supports this move. I'm sure the Beatles have a great deal with the Universal Music Group at this point and will be able to see their royalties very clearly and see that money quickly.
All right, exciting stuff. Joe Levy, thanks so much.
Good to be here.